Before 1974, a woman in America could not open a bank account without her husband's signature. She could not get a credit card in her own name. The law said her financial life belonged to someone else, so she built her own. In 1961, a seamstress in Baltimore named Estelle kept $847 in a coffee tin buried inside a flour sack at the back of her pantry. Her neighbor Agnes knew because Agnes kept hers in a hollowed-out book on the third shelf of a hallway cabinet. They had told each other, nobody else. That was Estelle's emergency, her exit. Her answer to a system that had decided she did not need one. Coming up, number 19 will show you the savings system that funded more Black women's businesses than any bank loan program of that era. Number 11 is the legal trick. Married women used to keep money in their own name before the law allowed it. And number 3 is the object millions of American women used as a secret account their husbands never thought to check. If you have ever wondered how the women before you survived a system built to keep them financially invisible, subscribe. Every week, this channel uncovers the money system's history forgot. Here are 25 forgotten ways women saved money in secret before they could own a bank account. Number 25, the flour sack method. In 1953, a factory worker in Cincinnati named Dorothy kept her savings in a flour sack sewn shut at the back of the pantry. Her husband checked the bank statement. He never checked the pantry. A 1957 University of Michigan survey found that 31% of married women maintained savings their husbands were unaware of. The researchers were confused. The women were not. The pantry was the first bank that asked no questions and charged no fees. Number 24, the egg money system. On farms across rural America, through the 1960s, money earned from selling eggs and kitchen produce was understood by convention, not law, to belong to the wife. A farmer's wife in Iowa, named Mildred, sold eggs every Tuesday from 1941 to 1967. Her egg jar funded her daughter's nursing school tuition and a $400 contribution to a local rotating credit circle. Her husband assumed the money went to household expenses. It did not. The egg jar was a financial institution with 26 years of uninterrupted operation. Number 23, the Neighbour Network. In 1958, a housewife in Detroit named Carolyn and 4 women on her street maintained a quiet agreement. If any of them needed money urgently, they could draw from a shared envelope kept at Carolyn's house. Each woman contributed $2 a week. No contracts, no paperwork, no husbands informed. When neighbor Ruth needed $40 for a dental procedure her husband refused to fund, the envelope covered it within a day. The network ran for 11 years and never failed a single member. It left no historical record because it was designed specifically to leave no record. The envelope at Carolyn's house was a credit union that the credit union would never have chartered. Number 22, the layaway account in a false name. Department stores in the 1950s and 1960s offered layaway, pay weekly, collect when fully paid. Women used layaway accounts opened under maiden names as informal savings vehicles. A bookkeeper in Philadelphia named Frances opened a layaway account at Gimbel's in 1954 under her maiden name. She deposited $3 a week with no intention of buying anything. After 14 months, she collected the deposit as store credit and cashed it through a friend. Layaway accounts were not reported to household financial statements. Frances ran the same system at 2 other department stores simultaneously for 9 years. The layaway account was the savings account that the bank statements never showed. Number 21, the church envelope surplus. In parishes through the 1960s, tithing envelopes were prepared by wives and handed to husbands for Sunday collection. Many women built a quiet surplus into the calculation, adding $1 beyond what the budget allocated. A parishioner in South Boston named Margaret calculated her family's tithe as $4 in dough when her husband believed it was $3. Over 7 years, she accumulated $364. The husband never counted what went into the envelope. The extra dollar in the tithe envelope funded things the household budget never would have approved. Number 20. The returned goods credit. In the 1940s and 1950s, department store return policies were generous and untracked. A homemaker in Cleveland named Helen discovered in 1947 that she could purchase budget-approved household items, return them for store credit, and bank the credit in an account that appeared on no household financial document. She accumulated it until she could convert it to cash through a cooperative sales clerk. Several large department stores in New York and Chicago quietly tightened return policies in the early 1960s, specifically to close what internal memos described as the housewife credit accumulation problem. The return counter was the deposit window for the store account the household never knew existed. Number 19. The Susu Circle. In Black communities across New York, Baltimore, and Chicago, from the 1930s onward, women maintained rotating saving circles called Susu. A domestic worker in Harlem named Viola contributed $3 a week from 1938 to 1962. Her contributions funded her daughter's beauty school tuition and a down payment on a Bronx house. Banks in New York denied mortgage applications from Black women at a rate exceeding 90% through the 1950s, regardless of income. The Susu did not deny anyone. It required only that you show up and contribute. The Susu was the mortgage lender that actually lent. Number 18. The pin money tradition. Pin money, a small allowance for a wife's personal expenses, was an informal institution across American households. A factory supervisor's wife in Pittsburgh named Ruth received $2 a week from 1932 to 1955. She spent none of it. She kept it in a tin box inside her sewing basket. Over 23 years, she accumulated $2,392, more than her husband earned in his peak year. When he died in 1956, she used it to pay off the remaining mortgage balance. He had spent his entire working life believing she spent it on hairpins and magazines. The sewing basket held 23 years of financial independence in a tin box. Number 17. Several insurance companies in the late 1940s began offering small policies that women could purchase directly, modest enough that they fell below thresholds requiring a husband's co-signature. A textile worker in Charlotte named Evelyn purchased a $750 life insurance policy in 1949 in her own name. The premium was 60 cents a week paid from the grocery allocation. Her husband never knew. She renewed it 4 times over 20 years. It was the only financial instrument she owned legally and independently in her own name until the Equal Credit Opportunity Act passed in 1974. The 60-cent premium was the only legal financial transaction she controlled for 25 years. Number 16. The Dress Fund. Women who managed grocery budgets in the 1940s and 1950s discovered that careful shopping could reliably underspend the allocation by $3 to $5 weekly. This surplus, called a dress fund, was kept separately and reported to no one. A homemaker in Kansas City named Pearl ran her grocery budget $4 under allocation from 1944 to 1963. Over 19 years, her dress fund produced an estimated $3,800, all invisible, all hers. The grocery receipt never showed what stayed in her pocket after she left the store. Number 15. The Children's Savings Account. Children's savings accounts in the 1950s required no husband's co-signature. They were educational accounts for minors, outside joint disclosure requirements. Mothers used them as parallel savings vehicles. A secretary in Columbus named Jean opened accounts for each of her 3 children in 1953 and deposited more than she told her husband. The accounts were reviewed at the bank, but not at home. When her eldest daughter had started college in 1963, the balance covered the first year's tuition, with funds her husband believed had been spent on childhood expenses years earlier. The Children's Passbook was the most effective savings account a mother could hold. Number 14. The Coal and Pantry Advance. In working-class neighborhoods through the 1950s, local merchants extended quiet, informal credit to women outside the formal household account. A steelworker's wife in Pittsburgh named Clara maintained a credit line with her coal merchant from 1948 to 1961 that her husband never knew existed. The merchant extended it because he had known her family for 20 years, and because the formal credit system never would have. Historians describe this as a shadow banking system running entirely on personal trust. The coal merchant extended more meaningful credit to women than any bank in the neighborhood. Number 13. The Secondhand Sale Circuit. Women who needed independent income without visible employment ran informal secondhand sale networks. A homemaker in St. Louis named Vera bought secondhand goods at estate and rummage sales, repaired them at home, and resold them through a network of women in her church, all cash, all unreported. Her monthly income averaged between $8 and $22 in 1950s money. Her husband believed she volunteered at church sales. She did. She also ran a small business from the volunteer table. The rummage sale table was the storefront that required no license and generated no tax record. Number 12. The Post Office Savings Account. The United States Postal Savings System, established in 1911 and closed in 1967, offered accounts through post offices requiring no husband's co-signature. Administered by the Postal Service rather than the banking system, they fell outside joint household financial disclosure. A garment worker in New York named Rosa maintained a postal savings account from 1931 to 1967. When the system closed, her account held $1,247, the only money she had ever held in her own name with full legal clarity. The post office window was the bank counter that never asked whose name was on the household account. Number 11. The Maiden Name Savings Account. Before joint disclosure requirements tightened in the 1960s, women could in many states continue operating pre-marriage savings accounts in their maiden names after marriage. A school teacher in Chicago named Margaret maintained her pre-marriage account through 22 years of marriage, from 1941 to 1963. She contributed monthly from her teaching salary, amounts her husband knew about generally, but never specifically. The account held $4,340 when she retired. She used it to fund her mother's nursing home costs over 4 years without requesting her husband's cooperation for a single payment. The maiden name on the account was the legal barrier that preserved 22 years of independence. Number 10. The Envelope and the Lining. A pattern emerged across oral histories from women of the 1940s through 1960s. Cash stored in coat linings, in handbag inner pockets reseamed to create hidden compartments, in the hollow heels of dress shoes. A bookkeeper in Baltimore named Helen kept a running fund of $40 to $80 sewn into the lining of her winter coat for 11 years. She retrieved and refreshed it seasonally. She never needed to use it. When she finally removed it in 1964, she deposited it into the first savings account she had ever opened in her own name. The coat lining held what the bank account was not yet allowed to. Here is something that does not appear in any financial history textbook. In 1972, a study by the National Commission on Consumer Finance found that most married women in America had no independent credit history, not because they had poor credit, but because every account they used was in their husband's name. If he died, her credit history died with him. They did not build secret savings because they were hiding something dishonest. They built them because they had watched what happened to women who had nothing when the man who held everything was gone. Number 9. The Daughter's Education Fund. Across immigrant households in the 1940s and 1950s, mothers built quiet, dedicated funds for daughters, unknown to husbands who assumed daughters would marry rather than study. An Italian immigrant in the Bronx named Carmela saved for her daughter's secretarial school tuition from the time the girl was 6. She funded it through neighborhood cooking, ironing, and underspending the grocery allocation. The daughter graduated in 1958, the first woman in her family to hold a professional qualification. Her father never knew the fund existed. The daughter's tuition was paid by a fund her father would have spent if he had known about it. Number 8. The Lending Library Income. Before public libraries reached every neighborhood, informal lending libraries operated from women's homes, magazines, novels, and pattern books lent for 1 or 2 cents per week. A homemaker in Philadelphia named Edna ran one from her front parlor from 1938 to 1952, clearing between $30 and $60 annually. She reported none of it to her husband, who believed she simply exchanged books socially. The income funded her personal medical appointments and a standing contribution to a neighborhood savings circle. The front parlor lending library was the small business that looked like a social habit. Number 7. The beauty school trade. Women who had learned beauty skills ran small parallel economies from their kitchens. A Dominican immigrant in Washington Heights named Carmen did hair for 8 women in her building every Saturday from 1949 to 1968. Her husband believed the income went into the household fund. Most of it went into a coffee tin, funding her mother's medical expenses in the Dominican Republic, and her own contribution to the building's rotating savings pool. Over 19 years, it was her primary source of independent financial agency. The kitchen became the salon that the beauty industry charged 3 times as much for. Number 6. The catalog order reroute. Mail order catalogs offered women in the 1950s a financial maneuver with no parallel in physical retail. A woman could place an order, have it delivered to a neighbor's address, and return it for catalog credit stored in an account not visible on household statements. A homemaker in rural Ohio named Dorothy used the system from 1953 to 1961, maintaining credits across 2 catalogs simultaneously. The system required a trusted neighbor who received the deliveries, almost always another woman running the same system from the same catalog. The catalog order number was the account number that appeared on no household statement. Number 5. The piecework income. Garment manufacturers in the 1940s through the 1960s offered piecework that women completed at home without formal employment records. A homemaker in Newark named Rosa took in finishing work from 1946 to 1959, completing it after her children were in bed. The income, $3 to $7 weekly, was cash, informal, and entirely hers. Her husband knew she sewed. He did not know she was paid for it. It funded her children's school clothes and a steady contribution to the neighborhood women's savings circle she had helped found in 1948. The sewing basket after midnight was the second shift that generated the independent income. Number 4. The Settlement House Savings Program. Settlement houses ran women's savings programs outside the formal banking system, requiring no husband's involvement. A Polish immigrant in Chicago named Zofia participated in the Hull House Women's Savings Program from 1932 to 1944. The program maintained her account in her name only. Hull House records show over 300 women maintaining parallel accounts simultaneously, the majority married, unknown to their husbands. Jane Addams wrote in 1910 that women's financial independence was inseparable from their social independence. The settlement house savings window served women the bank building would not let through the front door. Number 3. The coffee tin. The coffee tin appears in more oral histories from women of the 1930s through 1960s than any other object in American domestic financial history. A domestic worker in Birmingham named Leona kept hers for 36 years, from 1935 to 1971. She used it for her son's bail in 1953, her daughter's wedding dress in 1961, her own dental work in 1964, and her granddaughter's first month's rent in 1970. Her husband of 40 years never opened it. He knew better. The coffee tin was the financial system that required no signature, no credit check, and no man's permission. Number 2. The hat money. Across Italian, Jewish, Irish, and Polish communities in American cities from the early 20th century, women kept a reserve folded inside a hat box, stored at the top of the wardrobe, accessible to them, invisible to anyone not specifically looking. Women called this walking around money, funds available immediately, without permission, explanation, or a bank trip that might require her husband's involvement. A garment worker in Brooklyn named Miriam kept hat money continuously from 1938 to 1965. She could not always tell you exactly how much was there. She could always tell you it was there. Hat money was not savings. It was sovereignty kept in a box on the top shelf. Number 1. The thing they all had in common. Every system on this list was built by women who were told the official financial system was not for them, not without permission, not without a man's name attached. And every one of them built something anyway, quietly, incrementally, with whatever they had. When the Equal Credit Opportunity Act passed in 1974, many of these women already had more independence than the law had just granted. The law caught up to them. They had not been waiting. Estelle in Baltimore. She never told her husband about the $847 in the flour sack, not in 40 years. When he died in 1977, she used it to pay for his funeral. Then she opened her first bank account, in her own name, at 63. She had been ready for 63 years. In 1960, a married woman who applied for a credit card in her own name was legally denied in most states. If widowed, her credit history was considered to have belonged to her husband in 1974. The Equal Credit Opportunity Act changed this overnight. The women who had the most money when the law changed were the ones who had been most consistently ignored by it. Ask the oldest woman in your family whether she had a coffee tin, a hat box, an egg jar, a Neighbour Network. Every one of them did. Leave what she called it in the comments. Next up, Estelle could build her own system. But she still could not walk into a bank and ask for credit in her own name, not without her husband, not without a man to co-sign. 25 reasons banks legally said no to women who had done everything right. That video is next.